Hello, and welcome to RP Geography. I was going to do this live, and I wanted to, but I have to do this on my phone, so I'm going to end up recording it and then uploading it. So I apologize for that. But I also decided to do a couple of these because maybe there's just too much material to even try to do in one shot. So instead, I'm just going to do a very brief introduction tonight, just a few minutes, just to cover what I'm going to do over the next few weeks, and then I'm going to go into a few myths, legends, and do one each week, probably about 8 to 10 minutes, and I kind of have a template of questions, and that's kind of what I'm going to go over today, and that's the way I'll tackle each of the myth or legend as I go each week. So let's just get right into that. Marquise on AbTab recommended Journey to the West as I would call it a legend that involves a particular mythos in the Ming Dynasty. So that has a very particular flavor, and it also has a very unique plot and story altogether. And I was personally considering going over the Celtic mythos because that's what I'm using heavily in my setting, and that's what I've been tackling these questions from. So I'm going to do both, one the first week and then the next the other. And by the end of that, if somebody or anybody watching has any myths that they'd like me to look into, read up about, maybe tackle with this kind of template and go over the different ways I might use that to build a setting, I would love to do that. Otherwise, I'll probably generate a third setting, do that, and if we hear nothing else, then that'll probably wrap it up. But that template itself, basically the way I look at a mythos when I'm kind of thinking about whether it's something I want to use, and it doesn't have to be like an official ancient human mythos. I mean, I find those to be the most compelling, and there's lots of different sources usually for those, so they're pretty easy to research, and that's nice. But a mythos could be, the Star Wars universe, something in pop culture like Star Wars, and so I think the idea is that it's a deep, thought out, well-built world with its own rules and its own history. So when I take one of those worlds, I'm really, the first thing that I'm usually deciding is, am I just looking for inspiration for an adventure, or am I looking for inspiration for a setting? And those two I would look for in very different ways. I don't have to even like the universe or the setting or whatever it is that I'm reading or watching that I'm trying to gain inspiration from. I just have to be interested in that particular adventure, the way that it went. So for instance, you don't have to like Lord of the Rings, but it does of course have one of your typical, treks up a mountain, riddle locked door, ancient beast, solve the puzzle, escape. If that is an adventure you're looking to run, whether you like that setting or not, you could take that and put that in just about anything. So if that's what I'm looking for, then essentially there's really nowhere else to go with this. That is just what I'm doing, and I'm just going to look at things and just think, how would I put that in my world? And then whatever I like goes in. Now, if I'm looking to build a setting and I'm looking for inspiration for that from a mythos, then it's usually different. The first thing I would ask myself is, how do I want to represent this setting as my own? Do I want to do it narratively? Do I want to do it mechanically? Or do I want to do it a little bit of both? I think as you'd expect, I probably recommend doing a little bit of both. I mean, narratively is almost unavoidable. That's usually why we're creating our own settings, because we want to tell a unique narrative. So the narrative usually goes without saying, and most people will maybe shy away from doing the mechanics, or they'll tackle it and never be able to actually, they end up playing the game before they finish it, because it takes more time, right? But I would recommend a little bit of each, or at least I should say at least a little bit of mechanics. And I'll give an example as to what I'm doing in a little bit. But once I have an idea as to how much I want to do of each, then I usually start thinking about the narrative. What parts of this narrative from the myth do I like and want to take, and how much of it? In other words, that basically, to give an idea of the full spectrum, I would say, do I want people to role play this legend, or a particular legend in this mythos? Do I want to tell a tale right from the book, with characters straight from the book? So, to use the example of Journey to the West that I brought up earlier, that Marquise recommended, there's the main central character, and first I should say the whole tale is kind of broken into multiple sections, and I think if you were looking to do a role-playing of a legend, you would look at the third section of that overall tale, because it's at that point where the main character gains disciples. And essentially what I'm saying is that would be where you'd go to if you were trying to replicate a legend, because there's your party, right? There's your multiple PCs. So then you can pre-gen, and you can find people who want to play that, and then that's what you create. And that's fine. So if that's what I want to do, then I'm looking for very specific things. I'm looking for a universe that has things that has legends within it that I like, an overall universe that I like, some unique features that I think I could replicate mechanically, and I would want to find all of that before I would build a setting for it. But then once I do, it's probably one of the easiest ways to go, right? Because you always have a riddle in front of you that you can solve. How do I replicate this part of the story? Okay, and I'll solve that with the mechanics. And then how do I replicate this part of the story? And so on. Now, getting more to, I think, the more abstract is, do I just want to take the overall feel of this? Like, for instance, are you a very big fan of Firefly? Do you want to run a sci-fi tabletop RPG game where you're in the Firefly universe, but you're not playing as part of the main crew? That's a little bit, I think, harder to do. It's probably easier in the beginning, because you just say, this is what I'm going for, but then how do you actually create that? So then on one of these future episodes for a particular myth, I would kind of run through, like, how would I do that for this myth? Like, what things would I take? Which things would I leave? And what form of the setting capture am I going for? And the different possibilities for each one. Because then eventually, you would get to the kind of most abstract, and it would just be like, is there something from a particular mythos that you want to just work into almost a more standard fantasy setting, and how would you do that? That is probably the easiest thing, right? Because you're really just looking for one thing from a myth that you like, and you're just taking it and you're going to pull it into your setting. Maybe you have a setting that you were trying to go for, like a alien planet version of Egypt, and you wanted to make some sort of a meta connection between the two for your players. So you looked into Egyptian myths or legends, and you take one right out of there, and then you kind of name drop one of the gods or something like that, but within the naming context of your own alien world that you've built for them. right? Like that would be something where you'd be looking through Egyptian mythology for something specific. You'd find it, you'd take it, and you would drop it in your world. It's very similar to the first possibility when I'm reviewing one of these myths, but it's not quite even. It's not quite as big. Like it's not quite as big of a change. In this case, you almost want to take something specifically from a particular myth because you want to make that connection. In the first one, we were just looking for the mechanical chain of events that we wanted to replicate in our world. So this requires even less manipulation, even less changes. You're really just going to take narrative almost word for word. So yeah, just to recap, I'm going to review Celtic mythology. I kind of go through some of the questions I've asked myself when using that for my setting. And then the week after that, I'm going to go over Journey to the West, which I'm going to review a lot more to kind of catch myself up on that. And I'm going to go over that here. And over those 2 weeks, if I can get a suggestion, a recommendation, I'll add a third, and we'll see what that is or what that could be. Thank you, anybody who watched, and have a good night, and happy gaming.